5 billion is certainly almost close to about $200 million. Today, if you relate 25 billion at 360, you can see that it is substantially even lower than $75 million. So what we're trying to say is that the capitalization has weakened quite substantially, and there is a need for us to say it is time to recapitalize Nigerian banks again.
President Muhammadu Buhari joined other African leaders in Niamey, Niger Republic, to launch a continental free trade zone that, if successful, will unite 1.3 billion people, create $3.4 trillion economic bloc, and usher in a new era of development. After 4 years of talk, an agreement to form a 55-nation trade bloc was reached in March, paving the way for this African Union summit in Niger, where attendees will unveil which nation will host the trade zone's headquarters, when trading will start, and discuss how exactly it will work. It is hoped that the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCTA, the largest since the creation of the World Trade Organization in 1994, will help unlock Africa's economic potential by boosting intra-regional trade, strengthening supply chains, and spreading expertise. Last week, the stock market depreciated on the last day of trading. As we speak, this week's proceedings are about to open on the floor of the Nigerian stock market. As always, NTA Business News will bring you daily outcomes subsequently. That's business news at this time. See you again soon.
And we have a newspaper reviewer by Altea in the studio. By good morning and welcome.
Good morning. How did you enjoy the Super Eagles one? Good morning, Kinsley.
Very good to see you.
Well, they won the match actually, but some of us still expected more good display of football. Technically, they were very sound, to be able to come back, to beat Cameroon, which is a very strong side. I give it to them.
Yes. Really, many Nigerians were sitting earlier the edge of their seat up to the last minute.
Exactly.
The match was engaging and interesting, and the Super Eagles say they will take every match as a final. So that's very encouraging to hear. I wish them the best.
And another team that actually takes every match as final is Madagascar. He's a debutant, that are creating waves,
Yes,
and
wave.
yeah, and some of the reports we heard about them is that some of them, most of them, are playing in second division leagues across the globe, in America, in Europe, and what have you. So they're not playing like a debutant, from what we can see.
And they have set a continental record.
Yeah, exactly.
They have. Well, it was a very interesting weekend, certainly, of soccer action. Nigeria sent out the cup holders, that's Cameroon, 3-2. Though, as you said, it was a cliffhanger victory for the Super Eagles. I mean, Nigeria and Cameroon, we've always been rivals. Yes. And it's so interesting now that Nigeria overcame the Cameroonian challenge. But perhaps also just as spectacular, and some would say, if not more so, South Africa sent the hosts, Egypt, out of the tournament, 1-0.
Seven-time champion.
And South Africa is not doing badly,
Yes.
in this
They are our
competition.
next opponent. We will determine whether they are doing badly or when
Oh, no. But what was admirable was the technical quality of the matches we watched at the weekend.
Yes.
You saw, Mo Salah of Egypt, Trezeguet of Egypt. There seemed to be nothing, for them to offer, against the South Africans. And they were clinical, they were clinical. But I'm not so sure of the Madagascans, perhaps because it was 120 minutes, by
But they played excellent penalties.
Second period of the extra time, you could see that they were already exhausted. Mentally exhausted.
Don't forget the climate, the atmosphere for which they were playing. But so much so that they have to take
the penalty kicks were excellent.
That's right. I
excellent penalty kicks. That tells you that, look, these guys have been in the business for a while.
Yeah, that's right. They played their spot kicks, you know, and then of course when the goals are against you, they welcome your penalties over the bar. Okay, let's.
We
All
have
right.
about 5 newspapers to review this morning. Let's see how quickly we can be able to accommodate all that. I have Blueprint here. With me, Blueprint newspaper. Just besides the Blueprint newspaper name print, we have government borrows 1 trillion naira yearly to fund SMEs. Sales rep is on page 20, and below the nameplates, yes, we have Ruga. Land Use Act could be repealed. SMBLF raises fears with a rider coalition cautions on Hanese and Northern youths. Is on page 20 as well. Assault. That's the kicker. NCWS rejects Abo's apology, demands UN intervention. Now, Lagos pastor arrested for raping, impregnating 15-year-old. The story is on page 32. And the lead story on the Blueprint newspaper this morning. Nigeria targets $150 billion US from 22 non-oil products with 3 riders to create 500,000 jobs. Trade must be free, fair, says Buhari. UN pledges support. And now, below the photo story here, how flood kills mobile police officer in Zamfara. It's on page 16. We will revalidate biometrics of candidates over last 10 years, says JAMB. It's on page 8. Nigeria can't survive another civil war. Only Shoyinka won. It's on page 6. NYSC denounces Islamization claim, says report writers' imagination. It's on page 9. NILDS partner, London's Varsity College on Africa Energy Transition. That's on page 5 of the Blueprint newspaper.
Let's also take a look at the Daily Sun newspaper. The Daily Sun has some of the stories Kieran already read from the Blueprint, but we'll take them and see how they have featured them on their front page. And here appears beside the nameplate of Daily Sun. Nigeria targets $30 billion as Buhari signs Africa Free Trade Pact. That's on page 5. And lead story, rumbles over Ruga with a number of riders. Southern Middle Belt leaders allege plot to repeal and amend Land Use Act. Niger Delta militants and Ohanese youth warn over implementation ultimatum. And Arewa Forum demands schemes reintroduction. Details of the story can be found on pages 5, 39, and 44 of the Daily Sun. And there's a photograph there on the front page of the Daily Sun newspaper showing Professor Wole Soyinka and several others at the laying of a wreath to mark the 21st anniversary of the passing of Chief MKO Abiola. That took place in Ikeja yesterday. Amongst those there, of course, is Rear Admiral Ndubisi Kanu, who was at some point military governor of Lagos State. Atiku and PDP call witnesses today against Buhari. That's on pages 6 and 7. Lawyers to seek probe of Abiola's death at ICC. That stands for International Criminal Court. How we can overcome his death. That's attributed to Professor Soyinka. And NAF fighter jets bomb Boko Haram and ISWAP camps in Borno. Details on page 6. Kirian.
All right, we have to buy it now.
Yes, well, disciples of June 12 gathered at the graveside of Chief Mashood Kashima Olawale Abiola to mark the 21st anniversary of his death. And they laid wreath and also paid tribute to him. They said the occasion was to celebrate the unity of our nation because Chief MKO Abiola's election in 1993 stood out as a united election that united the whole of the country. Meanwhile, Nigeria, that has been awaited, has at last signed the African Free Trade Agreement. President Muhammadu Buhari put pen to paper at Niamey yesterday, and when he signed, the president did so at the 12th Extraordinary Summit of the AU, particularly for the face of the continental field trade. He emphasized that free trade must also be fair trade. He has stressed that African leaders should focus on developing African economies, creating jobs for the young, dynamic young population. He called for the buy-in specifically of the private sector, civil society group, and all public, of the public generally. Ghana is now to benefit as the host of the Secretariat for the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Benin Republic also signed yesterday as the 54th nation. So far, it is only Eritrea that is left to sign. There are 55 countries, and it is estimated that the population for which this free trade will take care of is about 1.2 billion people. It has been described as the largest trade pact in the whole world. The 22nd instrument of ratification, which led to the agreement, was signed in April of 2019. President declined attending the last summit in Kigali, and his reason at that time was that he wanted to consult widely before Nigeria could join. And he also raised the alarm that we didn't want to start a free trade movement, a trade association with our continental brothers that will become an outlet for importing goods from other continents. So Africa is set, and the vision is for one of integrating for prosperity and a peaceful Africa. Meanwhile, our nation is reveling in the joy of the Super Eagles surmounting Cameroon 3-2, but South Africa also succeeded in beating host Egypt 1-0. In fact, the stadium was packed full, and the cheering spectators of Egypt went silent when the single goal came in, and by the time the match was over, half of the stadium was almost empty. But this will now rekindle the rivalry between Bafana and the Super Eagles. Nigeria is the 3 times winner. They beat the defending champion. Bafana has won it once, and they beat the host and the only country that has won the AFCON 7 times. The challenge now is between Super Eagles and Bafana to qualify for the semi-final. Bafana has beaten Nigeria only once, and that happened in Nigeria. But most often than not, the Super Eagles taunt the Bafana, saying that the only time they won the Cup of Nations was when Nigeria did not participate. So there's always been critical rivalry between Bafana and Super Eagles.
And Super Eagles. Nigeria, of course. Nigeria boycotted the 1996 Cup of Nations, on account of differences between the then General Sani Abacha and Nelson Mandela over occurrences in the Niger Delta, in particular the execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa and others. Otherwise, perhaps South Africa might still have been struggling now for their first title of the Cup of Nations.
Let's see what happens when they meet at the quarterfinal stage, because it's a very crucial stage as far as this competition is concerned.
But the fact must be stated. All the nations of Africa are playing fine, beautiful football. Exactly. There are no minions on the continent any longer.
And South Africa...
Look at Benin Republic. Benin is in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, South Africa exhibited some level of dexterity by playing Egypt. And that goal came barely 10 minutes to go. That was why they were really subdued. Yes.
And they made Mo Salah and Trezeguet virtually useless.
Exactly. Okay, to the Nigerian pilots this morning, below the nameplate of Nigerian pilot, we have Operation Green Sweep 2. NAF jet kills ISWAP fighters, destroys tactical base, is on page 7. Then the lead story, fallout of Supreme Court judgment with 2 riders. INEC rigged for Oyetola, says majority judges. We don't rig elections. That's from INEC. It's on page 8. And at the foot of the Nigerian pilot, or rather below the photo story here, where you can see the president of Nigeria signing the African Free Trade Program. Now, 40 witnesses to testify against Buhari, APC. Atiku, PDP, tender 31,371 exhibits. We will raise objection on all exhibits, says Buhari, APC, and INEC on page 8. There are other stories. 31 inmates gain freedom in Enugu on 42. Buhari signs world largest trade agreement in Niger Republic is on page 10. Women reject Senator Abo's apology, demands justice. It's on page 10. Middlebelt Forum condemns a Gatu Church massacre by suspected herdsmen. It's on page 42. IGP to dock Adamawa senator this week over assault on a woman. It's on page 11. I will use sport to bring investors to Nasarawa. That's Governor Sude. It's on page 25.
All right, Daily Trust is next for us. We just take some of the headlines. Some of them, of course, have been read from other papers. The Daily Trust newspaper, below the nameplate, you have this headline, Obaseki to probe Oshomole over hospital contracts. That's on page 6. And the lead story says 12 states reel under 2.1 trillion naira debt burden. And the infographics there certainly provide the explanation, detailed explanation or graphical explanation of the level of indebtedness of the states and what they need to do to get out of it. Now, below that, jump to reconfirm biometrics of all UTMA candidates. That's on page 3. Kogi governorship, that's right at the foot of the front page. APC settles for indirect primaries. Details on page 13. Bio.
Yes, the Air Task Force wing of the Operation Lafia Dole has cleared some locations of what they describe as Islamic ISWAP, Islamic State of West African terrorist group. There has been some confusion because they described the location as Bakassi. Some people mistake that for the southern part of Nigeria, where you recall between Nigeria and Cameroon there was dispute, and it eventually the World Court gave it to Cameroon. This Bakassi is a location on the fringes of Lake Chad in Borno State. You may also recall that there were some militant groups that called themselves Bakassi Boys. Some of them were said to have gone underground and fused into the insurgent group Boko Haram. And therefore, they had camped at the fringes of Lake Chad, and the Air Force, following intelligence, were able to rout them. And this has been considerable devastation of the initiatives. And therefore, it has enhanced the military operations and the final demise of the insurgents in the northeast.
Okay, now to editorial. Let's take the editorial. This morning it's taken from the Punch newspaper. It's on page 26 of the Punch newspaper. Governors, cavalier dissolution of local government. Hiding under the pretext of a range of Machiavellian maneuvers, state governors, particularly those who have just been inaugurated, have moved to undermine the local government system. Between inauguration day on May 29 and now, some of the new herdsmen in Oyo, Bauchi, Adamawa, and Imo states have summarily dissolved the local government administrations in their states.
Yes, the editorial is drawing the attention to a kind of a political pattern that is coming with the dissolution of local government. If you look critically, you see that the four states have been cited there: Oyo State, Bauchi, Adamawa, and Imo State. Just for 5 months back, they were APC states, and now they are all PDP states. And if you go back, during the term of Governor Kayode Fayemi 2010, when he also took over, the same thing happened. In his own case, the Supreme Court even gave a ruling that it was executive recklessness. Again, if you go back, Governor Nyesom Wike in the River State, when he came into office, he also dissolved government. So it is a pattern of discomfiture between when a new government comes in and inherits from a different political party. And it is not far-fetched. In spite of the fact that Section 7 of the Nigerian Constitution makes provision for the local government, the setup apparently appears to be a political setup. Are you surprised that any time there's a local government election, it is almost the incumbent administration in the state that win all the seats, almost 100%?
But is it constitutionally right for governors to dissolve local government administration when the tenure of those at the helm of affairs, those council areas, have not expired? Based on because you're not from my party, you can run on them. Is it constitutionally right?
Well, there is confusion here. From the actions, some governors believe they can do what they are doing. In the instance of the River State government, the litigation went, and what the governors did was upheld in court. In the case of Ekiti State, the Supreme Court described it as executive recklessness. But the editorial is blaming the federal constitution that we run as the problem because it established the third local government as a third tier of government, but it is not operating like a third tier of government. So these are what they are describing as contradiction that the Ninth National Assembly should make initiatives to resolve.
There are court decisions invalidating the dissolution of duly elected local government councils by state governors. So there's nothing.
But they're not enforced now.
That's
judgments are not enforced. So
that is part of the lawlessness that we have seen in the Fourth Republic. It's unfortunate. And of course, we've had guests discussing on Good Morning Nigeria how the third tier of government has been emasculated by the state governments. So that's precisely what is playing out. A way has to be found around all of this going forward.
And until a way is found, Kingsley, it's going to be a huge problem. We are practicing democracy and presidential system for that matter, and they have a tier of government that is dysfunctional for so many years. So how will the rural areas be properly developed if you now call them out? If there's a disconnect, because there must be a disconnect.
Part of the issue is sometimes when you look at the composition of the state independent electoral commissions, it is usually populated by clearly partisan persons, and then the kind of elections that they conduct will be witnesses, and Bayo just repeated that the ruling party must win 99.999%, and there's no voice, for the opposition. So it's all a charade, and I think that we can overcome that. Bayo, just before we let you go and to express our appreciation, let's go very quickly now, that I'm sure we can capture that. Page 24 is sign language that we normally get from time to time. This is taken from Daily Trust newspaper. It says, and this is a photograph of a sign somewhere in Lincolnshire in England. Raspberries, new potatoes, homegrown. Bayo, well, you have to groan to eat those potatoes and raspberries.
Rhythmatically, he has communicated.
All right, homegrown, that's supposed to be a double E, actually. That's to grow it at home. Bayo, thanks a lot for being around. See you tomorrow. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be discussing the implications of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and other matters arising.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
Corruption not in my country.
Titi! This girl. I sure say she dey read.
Read for waiting.
The exam wey she wan write now.
You mean say you no register her for special center?
Which one be special center?
You got arrange am. She go pass one time.
That one na cheating now.
Everybody dey do am. My son, we don dey look for maths for the past 3 years. I go do everything I fit do.
Hey, Mama Chike, stop. No be everything na be the right thing. Imagine say doctor wey wan treat your pikin now. Na that your special wuru-wuru center. Now you take pass all the medical examination. You go let am touch your pikin?
God forbid.
Little drops of wuru-wuru. They create mighty ocean of corruption. Make you go teach your pikin, make you dey study hard. Say dignity, dey for hard work. No nonsense special wuru-wuru center for Chike.
Special center. Cancel.
Not in my country.
Our country is filled with people with different skills. And like the game football, we all have a position to play. Some are in charge of protection. They keep the line safe from attackers. They are the defenders. To win, we must come together as one team. We must play as Nigeria united.
In Nigeria, there is one sound we need to silence. So let's silence toothache before it starts with Oral-B All-Round Protection. Its advanced technology helps prevent both tooth holes and gum problems that can lead to tooth loss. It strengthens your teeth, giving them all-round protection. Because the only sound we really want to hear is that of our future. For healthier, stronger teeth in 1 week.
Are you aware that your perfect family may be under threat by germs? Germs can cause infectious diseases like diarrhea, typhoid, and flu. These infectious diseases are amongst the biggest killers of adults and children. In Nigeria, tens of thousands of children under the age of 5 have died due to diarrhea caused by germs, which could easily have been prevented. These illness-causing germs are everywhere. Dirty surfaces, on cuts and wounds, on your clothes, in unclean bathing water. To protect your family from germs, use the power of Dettol's 1 capful. For surface cleaning, for first aid, for your laundry, in your bathing water, and to protect your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol sure.
You are watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And now to kickstart our conversation, let's begin with a background put together by Serafina Okon.
In 2012, the continent's heads of states and governments resolved to establish African Continental Free Trade Agreement, ACFTA Treaty, to create a single continental market for goods and services in member nations of the African Union, thereby promoting free movement of businesses, persons, and investments using a single currency. Years after the first meeting, specifically on June 2015, at the African Union Summit in South Africa, consultations and negotiations for establishing the treaty commenced with all 55 African Union states by 2017, which was deadline for the treaty to be adopted. Many member nations requested for more time to continue consultations on the potential impacts of their economies, meaning that the deadline must be exceeded on account of this request. President Muhammadu Buhari said Nigeria will only be signatory to the Continental Free Trade Agreement if the nation's national interest as well as regional and international obligations are balanced. Nigeria saying it was delaying its signature to the agreement to widen and deepen domestic consultations to ensure all concerns were addressed. However, President Muhammadu Buhari signed the document at the ongoing African Union Summit in Niamey, Niger Republic. Nigeria is not a lone signatory, as the Republic of Benin joined the next level administration in signing the documents, making it 54 African countries to append their signatures. Questions begging for answers are: how much will the treaty impact on government's revenue and social welfare? What should be done to ensure optimum outcome? How much would this help in unlocking Africa's economic potential? Would it contravene any international trade rules? Some quarters are of the opinion that it would have negative impacts, including massive smuggling that would turn Nigeria into a dumping ground for goods produced outside Africa. These and more will be addressed shortly.
All right, we have guests with us in the studios here in Abuja, as well as at our Lagos Network Center. And our correspondent is also on standby in Niamey. That's the capital of Niger Republic. First, let's welcome the guests who are right here with us in the studios, beginning with the regulars. Ken Ukoha, who's a lawyer and president, National Association of Nigerian Traders. Ken Ukoha, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria. Of course, he was a member of the presidential committee that reviewed the free trade agreement before Nigeria's accession. Ken Ukoha, again, delighted to have you with us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Also here with us in the studios is Professor Jonathan Aremu. Professor Aremu is a professor of international economic relations at Covenant University in Ota, Ogun State. Professor Aremu, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay. Kieran?
Yeah, yes, we have here in the studio Mansour Ahmed. Mansour Ahmed is the president of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. We're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And in our Lagos studio is Moda Yusuf, Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much and good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. As we indicated a moment ago, our correspondent is in Niger Republic, that's Niamey, where the meeting of the heads of state took place, perhaps still taking place. Our correspondent is Makut Simon Mancham. You can see him there on the right side of the split screen. Makut, give us a sense of the mood at the extraordinary session of the AU with regard to what has been regarded as the big deal of Nigeria acceding to the agreement.
Okay, good morning, Kingsley and Kieran. Indeed, it was a landmark moment for Africa and Nigeria because much awaited was the signature of Nigeria to this agreement. Everyone knows that Nigeria is the largest economy on the and of course, it has all the parameters of a market that would drive such an agreement. So everyone was waiting for this signature. As at yesterday, virtually all the countries had signed in except Eritrea, as you mentioned earlier. They have not signed in, but the Eritrean president at the closing of the session indicated that they are willing to sign. But just a few details. He was inviting the AU to send experts to his country to do some last-minute checks. But the meeting essentially was to conclude this phase of the agreement. You have mentioned earlier that it entered into force when 22 countries signed in. So yesterday, Nigeria signed in and others that were ratified made the numbers to reach to 54. So some have signed in like Nigeria, but they have not ratified. As at yesterday, about 20 ratified. Those countries, among others, include Egypt, Ethiopia, Gambia, Ghana, and so many others. Nigeria is in the list of countries that have not ratified but have signed in. Algeria, Cameroon, Angola, and many others are in that category. So it was such a big moment for Africa. From all the people that were represented there, from the UN Secretary General, represented by the Deputy Amina Mohammed, to the World Trade Organization, the Afro-Exim Bank, and so many others. It was a big moment. Everybody sounded optimistic that indeed this was the time for Africa to decide how it trades with itself and how it deals with the rest of the world. Currently, as you may know, the Africa is known for raw materials, much very less known about manufacturing. No value addition, no processing, and of course, this has caused a lot of loss of jobs. So, and in that summit was very crucial for the continent, and everyone who spoke at that summit, including the AU chairman, President Al-Sisi of Egypt, sounded very optimistic.
All right, Makut, thank you for your opening remarks. But let me take you to some specifics. What are the thematic contents in the instrument of agreement that actually were considered by the nations that signed that agreement? You rightly put it that Africa is a continent where manufacturing is at the back seat, and that a situation where everybody is optimistic that this is going to work. Are they thinking of the implementation possibilities of this agreement?
Well, thank you, Kieran. The summit itself, the 12th Extraordinary Summit, was a kind of launching of the operational phase of this agreement after, because in considering some of the concerns you're raising, 5 instruments were actually unveiled. 5 instruments were launched, and those include the African Trade Observatory Dashboard, the online non-tariff barrier monitoring, reporting and elimination portal, the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, the after password protected online negotiation portal, and of course the agreed rules of origin and appendix to the rules of origin. Now, all these are to move to the next phase of this agreement. How do their economies, while at the same time ensuring that they remove barriers that will eliminate that will eliminate constraints to trading with one another. How do countries encourage production of goods in one country or the other? And as the case may be, if a Nigerian is buying goods from South Africa in euro or dollars, does he have to pay in the Chinese yuan? So the process now is fine-tuning how these nitty-gritty issues will be dealt with. The Afro-Exim Bank chairman, for instance, Professor Orama, who is a Nigerian, by the way, made clear that they are almost good to go on the payment clearing systems, where people can buy goods in one country and pay in local currency, unlike the situation where they have to resort to a non-African denomination in settling their bills. So those details are being worked out. And during one press briefing by the Commissioner for Economic Affairs, we raised these concerns as to whether or not this whole thing will amount to importation of goods and just recycling and cycling them all around Africa. And he said, well, Africa is very much conscious of that. And of course, they are putting some of these instruments to ensure that that does not happen. Rather, what they expect to see is that
Makut, you are breaking. I hope that the line clears up when we return to you subsequently. But thanks a lot already for the trove of information and situation report that you have given to us from Niamey, the capital of Nigeria Republic. Makut Simon Mancham, thank you very much. We'll come back to you later on in the course of the conversation. Let's now return to our guests here with us in the Abuja studios, as well as Muda Yusuf, one of our regulars, who is the DG of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and is in our Lagos Victoria Land studios. Gentlemen, beginning first with Ken Okoha. Ken, I recall, the views that you expressed the first time we took on this subject with Nigeria's trade negotiator, who was also part of the conversation on that occasion. And then the subsequent Nigerian government policy statement that, look, we needed to take a step back, to review the agreement, have a proper understanding of it before moving ahead. Now, in the months that have passed, from your perspective and from your participation in all the transactions in terms of reviewing the agreement in proper detail, do we now have a clearer understanding of it? And if so, what, in your opinion, will be the highlights?
Thank you very much, Kingsley, and thank you, Nigerians. Let me start by commending NTA for helping to bring us to where we are today on this particular agreement. Perhaps were it not for NTA and that program of that day, President Buhari would have gone ahead, because it was just 2 days to the signing in Kigali. And President Buhari would have perhaps gone ahead to sign that agreement without people knowing exactly what the contents are, what exactly we are heading into, what the challenges are, and then how we can be able to surmount all of these challenges. And we would have perhaps with a closed kind of eyes, signed that agreement. But then today, we can say with all our heads high that Nigeria stands to be the first, and I stand to be corrected, and the only country in Africa that is going into the agreement with eyes open. It is not opaque. And I think, by the way, it's important to lay this background, that this present administration has really shown a beautiful level of listening ears. First, this is the first administration that has gone into such agreement with qualitative and quantitative analysis. This is the first administration in Nigeria that has gone into signing agreements with careful, insistence on empirical process, insistence on analytical procedure, insistence on, what I call evidence-based approach, and today, a consultative mechanism brought in. And if you look at all of this, we see a lot of people who have been banging on the government of this, country, go and sign. But none of them has also looked at the implications and the potentials that we have. Now, going to your question directly. Just yesterday, the big masquerade came up to the show. And of course, in Niamey, everybody knew when Nigeria was signing. It was a world event. It took a global, kind of show. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Number two is that we are now clear on where we are heading to. Of course, it is clear to us that in the first place, AFCFTA has a lot of potentials for Nigeria. And I want to tell you that there is no country in Africa, out of the 54, 55 countries of Africa, where you don't see Nigerian traders buying and selling. And therefore, if there is any country that should benefit in the AFCFTA, it should be Nigerians. But I have a little challenge there. The challenge is that in whatever they are selling or whatever they're buying, 96% of whatever they are doing there is imported from the Asias, from the Americas, from the Europe. Leaving only 4% brought in from Nigeria. And this 4% has 2.5% agro-produce, 2% given to manufactured products, and the remaining 0.5%, garments and others, like cigarettes and all of that. Now, if you look at this, it also goes to tell you that we have been doing business intra-regionally. 95%, and I know where I'm working towards, some statistics, so that it will be clearer where we're heading to. 95% of Nigeria's export, as we have today, is based on minerals, crude oil, and liquefied natural gas, leaving the rest of 5%, to other commodities. Now, what is the state and what is the future of manufacturing, industrialization, and what is the future of job creation, employment? What is the future of wealth creation? And of course, all of us know in this country how many jobs that the oil sector, the crude oil sector, has created. Almost zero. So this is the first challenge.
I'm not really cutting you short, but I want you to redirect, your answer to, of course, match with some of the issues you have personally raised. We said that, the government has passed through analytical procedures, consultative mechanisms, and what have you. And he came up with statistics of the trading pattern of Nigerians in the other African nations who are ordinarily, selling what we manufactured elsewhere. And if you're talking about Africa's free trade zone, are we not talking about products produced in Africa. And that is where manufacturing comes in. From the potentialities you have mentioned, what are the assurances that when this begins, that Nigeria will step up, other nations will step up in terms of local manufacturing? Because if that is not done, all these potentialities we're talking about may not be realized. What's your thought?
Now, the reason why I am reeling out these figures is for you to understand some of those concerns that we were raising, and they are now very clear with the analysis, the approach that we took. It is clear to everybody that, look, it is not just a tea party. There are pros and cons. There are costs and benefits. And I started from the benefits, yes, potentials, yes, but in the midst thereof, there are a lot of challenges, hurdles that we need to also pass. Now, where I was heading to is that although we have signed, yes, but there are still some concerns. And those concerns are very legitimate. Legitimate in the sense that, look, take for instance, the CBN has been helping in fashioning a way. And by the way, we just came out from recession. And there are sectors that helped us. Go back. Sectors that helped us to come out of recession. One of them critically is the manufacturing sector. And why was it so? The reason was that this administration blocked imports. Presented some policies that, we have to come back to alternatives, local alternatives. Blocked imports, and look, you remember the 41 items.
Yeah, they were not blocked. They denied them.
Denied them. Of course, whether we are like, is that they were blocked. Okay, so they denied them. But here we are. If we denied the importation of those from outside, and we are going into a free trade now, of course, there is no denial again. The challenge will now be the CBN was raising funds to assist the manufacturing sector. The recent one is the textile sector. And you have the Anchor Borrower Scheme. You have policies like the NASAL. You have policies like the Growth Enhancement Scheme. Now, if these are targeted, the question is, at the end of the day, and this is a big challenge, now this agreement is leading towards revenue reduction because you are going to liberalize your trade over the 15 years.
All right. Ken Okoa, thank you very much there for your elaborate opening remarks. So we will pause you and then bring in the other guests. First, Professor Jonathan Aremu. Professor Jonathan Aremu, what's your take on Nigeria finally acceding to the Free Trade Pact?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. And I have to congratulate Nigeria, particularly our president, for taking that wonderful bold step. And Ken has said a lot about the background issues that led to where we are. So I don't need to actually revisit that one again. But the agreement is signed now. Soon it will be ratified. That is when the work really begins. You see, economic integration is not free. Surrendering of certain kind of sovereignty to be able to take on certain responsibilities. Economic integration, which we are going into, African Economic Community Treaty, Abuja, 1991, concluded in that particular year, have certain phases. The first phase is the free trade area. After that one, we are still going to custom union, which is a higher level of economic integration. After that one, the entire Africa still have in mind that we are going to go to common market. Then after that one, economic union. So this is just the first phase. In fact, where we are, where we signed yesterday, was first phase, stage 1. Under African Continental Free Trade Area, first phase, 3 protocols. The protocol on trade in goods, protocols on trade in services, and then protocol on dispute settlement. Stage 2 of African Continental Free Trade Area, which is coming up as from next month, I'm privileged to serve on the investment protocol at African Union. Involve investment, that's the first protocol. Second protocol is the protocol on competition policy. And then third one is intellectual property. So you see, where we are now is just the beginning stage. And then let me say this one, Nigeria need to fully understand what we are into. I was in Enugu and Calabar about a few months ago, and then a question came out, and people said that, hey, you know, our border is porous. I don't want to hear that. Every country has borders. Anytime you say, doing what we need to do, economic integration is not free. But let me say this one, economic integration has two things in theory and in practice. First one is trade creation. You are creating trade among the contracting parties, higher level of trade, by diverting trade from other areas. Because other countries that are not part of that pact, we have to still be paying import duty, which will make their product to be higher. Their product will now be higher as a sort of the domestic import duty, which member nations of the participating countries are putting so that they can trade among themselves. So, let me say this one again, just to be able to support, and in one way add to what Ken said. It is not only that other countries will be sending to us, which are equally have opportunity to sell out. In addition, is the fact that contracting opportunity, subcontracting of certain things we are producing in Nigeria, that we go into manufacturing of other sectors within Africa will be possible without import duties, which will make their production capacity to be upgraded. And that is why in the next phase, you are now merging investment protocol with this one, because you can't be talking of trading without investing anyway. You have to first of all invest before you trade. So we have tried the free trade area, but we have not taken care of the investment protocol that will allow us to have tradable products.
Explain that. Explain that. What investment protocol? Explain it, and then tradable products.
Okay. Yes, you want to actually facilitate trade. But you need to actually invest in production so that you can have this produce to be able to trade.
Exactly.
Therefore, next stage of ACFTA, stage 2, take care of investment protocol that will facilitate investment across borders. You see, hitherto, the savings in any domestic economy is what determines the investment of that economy. But African Union is now saying that if we bring an investment protocol into it, it will allow capital to cross borders. And I'm happy about what actually came up yesterday, the issue of payment system, a continental payment system. We have been doing that in ECOWAS Commission. We don't have to open letter of credit in dollars and pounds to be able to trade among themselves. We are still going to be wasting money. We should be able to use our domestic currency to trade among ourselves by the central bank in the region or in the continent shaking hands. Each of them has values to dollar, to pounds. Having known the value, pay me your domestic currency. Somebody coming to Nigeria, to trading with Nigeria, right? Buying something from Nigeria, from Ghana, he doesn't have to pay dollars. That's what we were doing. Oh, but with a payment system, what we need to be done is that what is the value of that thing in dollar? If that's the value, okay, you'll be paid in naira. And then we conserve our foreign exchange. You can see the beauty of a free trade area.
Yeah.
It will allow you to be able to conserve the wastages of the foreign exchange, which you have been using to trade among yourselves, among so many other benefits. But we need to come back home to be able to really put in policies, set up committees that will fashion out all this work, because it won't come free.
Thank you indeed, Professor Arim. You made very salient points here. Tradable products, investment protocol, and things like that. And that brings a question. Mansour Ahmed, you are the president of Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. And I recall vividly what the President Buhari mentioned in the course of signing this agreement, that he would not want to see a situation where products imported from other parts of the world are traded in Africa in the name of a free trade agreement. And when you say investment competition, it means that African investors are expected to invest in products, tradable products. But currently, manufacturing is not, of course, the level of manufacturing capacity, not just in Nigeria, but the other African nations, especially Francophone countries, who believe in majorly in importing, from France. So how does this picture look, from your perspective?
Thank you very much, Kire. I think the Ken and the professor have put the bottom line on this. But I think at the core of this whole agreement is the fact that two factors have always been seen as two of the factors that have kept African economies down. First, that our economies are basically resource-based economies. We produce agricultural products or minerals and we export them. These minerals or agricultural products, we are paid chicken feed for them. Somebody else takes those things, manufactures products, consumable products out of them, brings them to us, and we buy at exorbitant price. Not only that, because the manufacturing process is today the job creating process in any economy. It means that those who manufacture those goods actually are the ones who create jobs. And because we import things and have to pay out of our little amount, we are then left poorer. So we export products, we export jobs to other economies and import poverty to ourselves. Now, so the question is, how can Africa change this narrative so that we are doing it among ourselves? We are not taking things out. The fact that I think Ken has highlighted is that our manufacturing sector, not just in Nigeria, but in fact, Nigeria is better off than most other African countries, contributes very minimally to the size of the economy. In fact, for Nigeria, it's about 8-9%. For most African countries, the average in Africa is probably less than 6%, which means that our economies are dependent on imports, because today everybody in the world is eating not raw materials, but manufactured goods. And if we don't manufacture, it means we have to rely on others. And that is why for most of Africa, what Ken highlighted is that 85% or more of our consumption is for manufactured goods from outside. The second issue, of course, is that because we are dependent on those manufactured goods, we also trade more with others than we do with ourselves. So that, for instance, the inter-African trade or intra-African trade, that is trade between African countries, constitutes less than 15% of the total trade of Africa. So if we're going to change that, we have to change three things. First of all, we have to change the relationship between our production, the relation between our manufacturing sector and our economy. We have to build a stronger manufacturing sector that will produce more of the things that we consume, and not only consume, but also be able to export. Now, to do that, obviously, we have to invest, and that's what the professor said, because you have to invest to create the productive capacity, the manufacturing capacity, and to produce competitively. And that is why competition is also very important. Because if I produce coffee, or if you like chocolate, at a price which the Swiss can, which is 10 times what the Swiss can do, people will still prefer to consume the Swiss product. So we have to, therefore, to create a competitive environment that enables our manufacturing companies to actually be able to compete with others, including the import. Secondly, we have to be able to organize our productive capacity in Africa in such a way that we can link up the strengths and weaknesses of various countries. For instance, Cote d'Ivoire produces a lot of cocoa, right? In fact, it's the largest cocoa producer in the world. Cote d'Ivoire exports most of its cocoa, raw cocoa, to places like Switzerland and Europe. and imports chocolate. And Côte d'Ivoire earns less than 5% of the total value of the chocolate trade in the world. So the Swiss get 95%. Now, here's Egypt. Egypt also produces chocolates. But Egypt produces chocolate not from Côte d'Ivoire cocoa, but from Swiss cocoa paste. So they import cocoa paste from Switzerland, make chocolate, and then try to sell chocolate to ourselves. So one of the things we have to do is to re-engineer our relationship so that Côte d'Ivoire can export cocoa paste, or at least can import cocoa to Egypt. That will make cocoa paste, and then so you see that we now internalize the relationship between production and consumption in the continent. So that's what all this is about. And as Professor said, building this trade capacity requires a lot of other initiatives and arrangements that will make it feasible and make it competitive. That is why the AFCTA is actually what they call a framework agreement, which means this is an overarching agreement which allows you to now identify the core things that we need to do with each other in order to create a tradable environment. So there are there are protocols. There are basically 6 core areas. First, trading in goods, which is highlighted. Trading in services. Then, of course, in order to trade properly, you have to have rules for the trade. So rules and dispute settlement procedure. Those are the first 3. Those are the ones that are now under phase 1 of the AFCT, which has been signed, which is now being negotiated, which I think negotiation will be completed about the end of this month. Then we go to phase 2. In order to produce, as he said, you have to invest. Therefore, you have to create investment mechanisms, and you have to agree on how do you promote this investment between one country and another within Africa. I belong to the manufacturing sector, and I know a number of manufacturing establishments in Nigeria that are now actually investing in other countries. The Dangote cement, for instance, is now investing in about 14 African countries. If you talk to Aliko Dangote, you will hear the difficulties he has to cross in order to be able to invest in Cameroon, in Zambia, in Ethiopia, or in Senegal. So those things have to now be worked out and regularized, and we have to set up standards and systems for doing this that will make it possible. Then, of course, the last one I will talk about, but then we'll come back, is that apart from investment, you also have to have these payment systems. So the rules around investment and around competition have to be also negotiated and agreed. So over the next several years, all these things will have to be negotiated so that we have a working market. And I think this is why the private sector, and that includes Ken's outfit and mine, the manufacturing sector, when in March 2018, other countries were signing, we said to the government, please, before you sign, let's make sure we understand what we're signing. And I think that's why Buhari put it. And that was why we must really commend Buhari for saying, yes, if my people are saying they don't know what I'm signing, then I will know what to sign. And what did he do? He then set up this committee, which is supposed to assess the readiness of Nigeria, the readiness of the Nigerian economy to enter this trading pattern. And that committee, in which I think all of us here were members, worked for almost 6-7 months and produced a report which is based on very practical assessment of the pros and cons of this whole business.
All right, Master Ahmed, thank you very much also. Muda Yusuf, of course, you've been soaking up all that has been said by the other guests, including our correspondents, and of course you've also at some point expressed your views on the Free Trade Pact. Now that Nigeria is in the agreement, awaiting ratification through a constitutional process, which is through the National Assembly, what are your immediate thoughts? And what will be the warning signs that we should also watch out for?
Thank you very much. I think it's a welcome development. I must congratulate the President and Nigerians for finally signing the AFCTA because it portends a lot of opportunities for investors in this economy across all sectors. Because we need to realize that, of course, we need to look at the structure of the economy itself. This economy is a 130 trillion naira economy. About half of that is in the services sector. So when we discuss matters like this, I think we also need to take into account the other segments of the economy and the opportunities that are there for them. Our service sector is a fairly strong service sector. We are very competitive in services, and the service sector is almost 50 trillion naira economy. And I think it portends a lot of advantage. We are talking about a market of about 1.2 billion people. We are talking of a market of 2.5 trillion US dollars. So it portends a lot of opportunities, even for manufacturing. Of course, along the West African coast, we have quite a number of our manufactured products there. Although most of those products get there informally because of the challenges at the borders and all of that. So sometimes when we even realize some of these statistics, the statistics sometimes understate the amount of trade that is taking place internally within the continent. Because more than half of the trade, especially in our manufactured goods, are done informally because of the challenges that of documentation, of dealing with officials at the borders, and all of that. So in all of this, I think we should see it as work in progress. The initial fears, I think, were a bit misplaced and a bit of a phobia, because it wasn't as if the moment we ratify, the thing will become effective. It was the beginning of a process. It was the beginning of a negotiation. So now that we have signed, I think it's an opportunity for us to now be part of the discussion. It's an opportunity for us to also begin to put our fears, our concerns, and all of that on the table. And given our stature in Africa, given the leadership role that we have played, either in issues of peacekeeping, and also in the issue of economy, and even in issues of economic integration. We were the champion of ECOWAS, in 1975. Of course, we have challenges with ECOWAS. And I believe that if we can live with the challenges of ECOWAS up till this point, the challenges of AFCTA should not be something that we cannot live with. So we are now in it. We have opportunities to discuss all the issues, put our concerns on the table, identify what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. So what we have done, I think, is a very good thing. But we also need to address issues that are internal to us. We have domestic issues that we need to deal with. We have domestic policy issues that we need to deal with. Because when we are entering into a competitive space, we also need to be ready to be part of it in order to get the right kind of value from the process. We need to deal a lot with our trade policy, for instance, to see what kind of intermediate products we need to bring in to ensure that we get our manufacturing sector and other sectors of the economy to be more competitive within this continental space. We need to deal with our monetary policy to ensure that both our foreign exchange policy and our interest rate policy also support the drive for competitiveness. We need to also deal with our investment policy to ensure that we position our industry and we focus on industrialization in a way that we stress our competitive and comparative advantage. All these strategies are very important domestically, so that we don't blame all the issues on the external factors. And externally, we have to also prevail on all the players, all the institutions within the continent to ensure that the rules of the game are observed, particularly the rules of origin. Because even within ECOWAS, we have that challenge. We have the ETLS, which is the ECOWAS liberalization scheme. You have instances where products will come from other countries. They go to the neighboring countries. They are labeled as being produced in those countries. So that is a very big fear, and these are some of the concerns that the manufacturers have expressed. So we need to get our institutions to work. We need to also ensure that our borders are not as porous and not as loose as it currently is. So we need to strengthen institutions to make sure that all of these things work for us. So I think it's a good thing that we are there. So we need to address domestic issues, domestic policy issues to ensure competitiveness. We need to address external issues that require the cooperation of other countries who are part of this process.
Mr. Moda Yusuf, thank you very much there for the points that you have raised. Now, in terms of national response to the emerging issues on the accession to the agreement, I just wanted to find out with your experience, and I'll also ask the question of the other guests who are here with us in the studios. Does the National Assembly have a good grasp of some of these trade issues and trade policy matters so as to know how to follow up either in terms of their resolutions, in terms of appropriate domestic legislation that will help fortify Nigeria's position while getting into this competitive continental arena?
Well, we need to engage. Even at the level of executive, I'm not sure that we have very good grasp of the policy dimension, domestic policy dimensions of these issues. So it's not just at the level of National Assembly. We need to get proper understanding of the right kind of domestic policy framework that can support the success of this agreement. So at the level of the executive, there has to be engagement. At the level of the legislature, there has to be engagement. And at the level of all the stakeholders, there has to be proper engagement. Because right now, there are a lot of gaps in our policies. The understanding of policymakers as to the issues of competitiveness of the investment environment is still not sufficiently at the level that it should be. If you are talking about issues of tax, the whole emphasis of the tax authorities is about revenue. And there's a point to which you drive investors that you create competitiveness problem for investors because you are trying to chase revenue. We have the same issues with the regulatory authorities. Many of the regulatory agencies, there is so much emphasis also on revenue. These things impact on the competitiveness of investment, including manufacturing. The same thing with the customs. The essence of the whole thing about customs is also about meeting revenue targets. So these understandings are very key. And again, on our monetary policy, the central bank is doing a lot now to bring down interest rates and all of that. That is commendable. That will help the issue of competitiveness. Then our trade policy, there are some inputs into manufacturing and into investment that are still being imported. Such inputs, we have to identify them, bring down those tariffs so that our industries can be more competitive. Then we need to deal with infrastructure issues. Right now, we are not yet on top of the solution to our infrastructure problem. Those things are also key. So at both the level of the executive, at the level of the legislature, there has to be engagement and there has to be proper understanding of the right kind of policy measures to take to ensure that we deal with all of these issues.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Gentlemen, after over 30 minutes of conversation on this very matter, it is very clear that whatever agreement that may have been signed, this is just the beginning of a process that will take time. Because from his explanation, it does seem that we have to go back to the basics, in terms of replanning ourselves domestically and others. And that affects also other African nations, because when it comes to the economy of all these African nations, some of them are nothing to write home about. Not to talk about manufacturing, not to talk about, domestic policy dimensions, as he mentioned. Well, I'm going to raise another issue, but that will be after the break, because I like Ken Ukoha, who is the national president of Association of Nigerian Traders, to address. But for now, let's take a short break. You are watching Good Morning Nigeria. When we return, we'll be doing, of course, the concluding aspect of our conversation for this morning.
One Football Confederation, 24 teams, 6 stadiums, 4 cities, 504 African stars, 1 trophy. The Africa Cup of Nations Egypt 2019 comes alive from June 21 with the showpiece final on July 19, 2019. Watch the 52 matches of the tournament live on Africa's biggest and largest television network, NTA, in partnership with Hotsports. Be part of the biggest soccer fiesta in the African continent as the Super Eagles go on a bold mission to clinch the prestigious title for the 4th time, to the excitement of millions of fans across the length and breadth of Nigeria. For inquiries, please contact Abubakar on 0803-331-0175 and Felix on 0803-308-2375. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
Our country is filled with people with different skills. And like the game football, we all have a position to play. And the strikers, they are the go-getters. They break barriers and steal the show. To win, we must come together as one team. We must play as Nigeria United.
Why don't you people sell imported materials here? As beautiful as the shop is.
Auntie, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. Really? And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced. Change begins with me too.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We still have all our guests with us, and we also have a torrent of tweets that have come in from our viewers through our Twitter handle at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen at NTA GMN. Kirian, let's go through some of those tweets very quickly, and then we'll turn to our guests. Badamasi H. Adamu tweets. That's to say that the African Trade Agreement will promote integration leading to the establishment of an economic union in order to raise the living standards of the people and maintain enhanced economic stability.
All right, from Mike Ayako, the free trade does not mean that all kinds of goods should be allowed to enter the country. Our borders should not be porous. There must be a deliberate policy by governments to curb dumping of goods for protection of our infant industries. We must energize manufacturing of goods.
Now, Titus Monday Knock tweets, African free trade will definitely promote economic and business interests to thrive better between African nations if well coordinated. But I fear that terrorists and negative financial activities might hamper what will unfold.
Isiaku Musa says, African free continental trade is no doubt a welcome development to the continent, but the African Union, AU, must evolve mechanisms by which businesses will thrive freely without fear due to the nature and multiplicity of dynamic markets in the continent.
Ababola Humbabs, let's hope that the continent works towards actualizing this plan.
Now, Law Alpha C, the proposal and the subsequent adoption is a good step for African economic integration, but I fear the effectiveness of the implementation which the panel will highlight on.
Cecilia Okoroma, I hope the signing of the free trade agreement is not the beginning of free criminality movement into Nigeria.
Now, Festus Akimbo says pressure must also be on our government to develop our infrastructure and try as much as possible to encourage some of our industries not to move to other African countries.
Now, Usman Banikantu tweets, I believe that the signing of the trade agreement by member countries was the result of due consultation and inputs from experts. So let's give the agreement the benefit of the doubt and wish for hitch-free implementation. Kyria?
All right, Ken Okoha, president of National Association of Nigerian Traders. Are you worried at all about quality of goods in circulation in Africa? Are you also worried about the low level of manufacturing capacity in Africa? Now, what are we going to trade on? Are we going to trade on imported goods from Asia? Or do you foresee a situation where Africa will all of a sudden evolve into a huge industrialized continent that will now churn out all manner of products that could be traded? Right. And again, what, in your opinion, should be the role of science, technology, and innovation in all of this?
Thank you very much. Of course, this aptly captures some of the challenges that we are foreseeing. And of course, it's important to note that there is potentials as far as Africa is concerned in industrialization. But perhaps it's also very important for us to understand that the statistics I gave earlier today, which talks about, let's start from the intra-regional trade for Nigeria. Nigeria has about 92% of trade with outside Africa. 92%. All are trading with, over the world, 92% of it is with outside Africa, leaving about 8%. Now, if you come also to the intra-African trade, there are 10 countries that stand out, and I want to give you where Nigeria stands. Look at, first is South Africa, which has 23.5% intra-regional trade. The second position comes to Namibia, 5%. Look at the gap, 23.5. The second position comes to Namibia, 5%. Now the third is Egypt, 4.9%. The fourth is Nigeria, 4.4. Now, some of us were querying this earlier, but it now became clear after all the analysis that the reason why South Africa is where they are is because of their industrial capacity, manufactured goods, variety. But then, where Nigeria comes up a bit is on agro. This is where we have comparative advantage. But if we had a position where we had trade policy in place, and this is one of the things that we have been crying about, we don't have a trade policy and we are negotiating trade agreements here and there. A trade policy that would have looked inwards, an inward-looking trade policy that would say, oh, come on, let there be a kind of fuse from agriculture, which provides raw material, to the industry. You will see that, our industrial outlay and capacity will be, getting higher and higher. And refined products, processed products will come in to fill the gaps. Africa is heading towards industrialization, perhaps unwittingly. Perhaps unwittingly. And that is the reason why we must, as Nigerians, also brace up for these challenges. But there's one other challenge that comes into play. The challenge of xenophobic attacks. In the past 30 months, it's been recorded that Nigeria has lost 130 lives in South Africa alone. 30 months. Most of these attacks just came up because of envy that you are trading. You are taking up their jobs. What would the AFCFTA be doing to ensure that these tracks are cut off? Yeah. Two is the issue of insecurity. Right? And these are linked to, products that people are moving from one end to another.
All right. Ken Okoa, thank you very much. Incidentally, it was a topic that we had Abike Dabiri and others discussed with us last week. Kira, I'm not quite sure of the date now, sorry. Sometimes one doesn't quite immediately remember some of these things. But Professor Aremu and then Mansour Ahmed will bring you in now. Professor Aremu first. Before the AFCTA came to the front burner, one common agreement that we were hearing about was the economic partnership agreement that France was pressuring, particularly in ECOWAS region, in particular Nigeria, to sign. And Nigeria restrained itself from signing under President Goodluck Jonathan. What does the EPA mean now that we have the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Excellent.
That is one leg of the question. Sometimes I like to double barrel my question. Now, in answering that question, also let our viewers know, now that Africa has a free trade agreement that is rolling, are other trade and economic blocs likely to fold their hands and be watching and then be clapping for us? So, what are the bumps or turbulence that Africa as a bloc should watch out for in order to overcome likely frustration from other continental blocs?
Thank you very much. I think that first question is very important at this stage. And Ken and myself, they know how we have really worked, particularly for Manufacturing Association of Nigeria during the days of discussion of EPA. You see, the Economic Partnership Agreement, without going into history, we all know that it's a kind of a situation which came up as a result of the stage the whole world has gone into. WTO was created 1st of January 1995. Therefore, the Lomé IV agreement that gave us preferential trade, that is, I'm talking of African and Caribbean countries, into European market, can no longer hold because it violates the principles of most favored nation treatment. The way you treat others that are in the group should be the same. Therefore, you cannot be treating the African Caribbean Pacific differently within the same WTO. And that is why European Union came up under the Cotonou Partnership Agreement to say, let us have a new agreement. And inside the Cotonou Partnership Agreement, we now have the EPA, which is Chapter 3. Now, that EPA was crafted by European Union. So it was actually designed by European Union, and then we negotiated with them. You see, when you are having a trade negotiation and somebody drafted this, you are negotiating from a very weak position because you don't know what led to the content of it. And that was why it was not a very good thing that we had to go into that agreement. Two, is the fact that they give a timeline. You have to do this between these. The world is not coming to an end. December 2007 was the time which we must have signed. And they said there is no option B. That was the thing. And that is what made Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana to actually have an interim agreement within the ECOWAS bloc in the EPA. But Nigeria said no, which is a good position for Nigeria, which we supported. Now let me say this. There's a difference between EPA and African Continental Free Trade Area. African Continental Free Trade Area is a homegrown, starting with Legal Plan of Action of 1980-82, concretized in the African Economic Treaty of 1991. It was a vision for Africa to move in a continental way that will unify us. And when you go back to 1963, our first Prime Minister has what we call the Afrocentric foreign policy. That is, Africa at the center of our foreign policy. That is what Nigeria may actually be going towards. So it was in that spirit they allowed Nigerians to actually take lead in terms of African Continental Free Trade. Okay. And lastly, is that when we have ACFTA, we can now conclude it to now go into EPA. Because EPA was to cut us into pieces. But Africans say, no, let us have a continental free trade area. But it's too late now because SADC already got their own EPA. So you prefer the one that will unite us economically? Yeah. Oh, okay, let's get to Monsignor.
In fact, another big difference between EPA and the AFCFTA is simply that EPA wanted to sustain the old world order arrangement. You produce raw materials, we manufacture, we give you products. And we'll give you concessions on what you submit us. And we'll allow you to also export to us some of those things you produce under our control. The AFCFTA is saying, no, we want, first of all, build our trading capacity within ourselves, learn to trade between ourselves so that we can boost both our economies as well as our trading capacities. And then we can trade with you as outsiders. And so, as the professor said, now that we have AFCTA, once it is operating well, then we can engage outsiders on our own terms as Africans. And it will not be because they have divided us into sectors and they can deal with us differently to create a divide and rule kind of arrangement.
Okay, sir. Let's return to Lagos, please, for a moment, because we want to take let's allow him a second take. Moda Yusuf, you have listened to the last comments from our guests here in Abuja, but I want just to add one thing. What about security in all of this? These African nations, most of them have security issues. Nigeria is part of it, and other African nations. How would that be addressed?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the security issue is a major problem, and it's one of the concerns that are embedded in all of these issues of economic integration. Because as we progress with the integration agenda, we will also be talking about free movement of people and all of that, which to a large extent could pose very serious security challenges, as we're experiencing already in Nigeria and in many parts of Africa. So I expect that as we negotiate the agreements, some of these things will have to be incorporated in the negotiations. In this kind of structure, we don't totally surrender our sovereignty. So individual countries still have responsibility to ensure the security of its own territory. So all this understanding have to be very clear. Because you cannot say that because you want to promote trade, and we have a very loose arrangement where people just come in with any kind of thing and pose security problems for any country. So I think individual countries have a responsibility, and this should be part of the engagement and the discussions in the negotiation. Secondly, it is important that you have the political will to make this process work. Even in ECOWAS, because when we compare the regional blocks, ECOWAS is the least in terms of the progress that has been made in economic integration. And it's because of the weak commitment politically to ensure that this process works. I mean, I listened to the president of Manufacturers Association talking about the experience of Dangote in trying to move cement from one part of the region to the other. You have very serious problems, even in ECOWAS. You have ETLS. In practical terms, some of these things don't work. We have all manner of...
Well, Moda Yusuf, we have to pause you there because time is not on our side any longer, but we appreciate your contribution to the conversation. Gentlemen, from all you have said, it does seem that Africa has a big deal in its hands, and a better framework for the implementation of this agreement will be better for the whole African countries. But of course, we have to realize the fact that if you are not a producing nation, you don't talk about the economy in the first place, because that is the alter ego, when it comes to having a good economic background as a nation. Kinsley.
All right. Well, it's on that note, of course, we'd like to thank all our guests who have been with us on the program this morning. First, of course, our own Simon Macham, who joined us via Skype from Niamey in Niger Republic. And Moda Yusuf, a while ago, was signed off by Kirian. Moda Yusuf is Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. With us here in the Abuja studios, our deep thanks to Professor Jonathan Aremu, Professor of International Economic Relations at Covenant University, Ota in Ogun State. Professor Aremu, thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciation also to Ken Ukoha, President, National Association of Nigerian Traders. Ken, thank you very much. We'll always call on you. But there are matters that have always been arising from this very issue. Thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you very much.
And our deep appreciation also to Mansour Ahmed, who President of Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. And by the way, he was also in Miami over the weekend in connection with the extraordinary session at which Nigeria acceded to the AFTA agreement. All right, so let's go over now to our sports desk.